up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG on the YouTube.com down there. We like magic, you know by now. And today, I got another one of these Aether Revolt deck techs for you. This one's actually a little bit ahead of schedule because I just missed you guys. And I missed you too, Julie. You're here now. Today we're going to talk about a deck that a lot of people on the internet have been obsessing over for like 2 weeks since I saw a certain 2-card combo, and we've been trying to figure out the best shell for it, and everyone's got different builds, and no, I'm not talking about Felidar Guardian Saheeli Rai combo. I'm actually talking about green-black counters. So this is the other deck in Standard that everyone's obsessing over and trying to figure out the best build of, and today we're going to go ahead and give you our build. And of course I would say this, but I'm trying to be objective. I sincerely think we have one of the best builds on the entire internet for the green-black counters deck. Here it is. Well, the combo that I vaguely referenced a second ago is Winding Constrictor and Rishkar Peemea Renegade. We're going to play 4 copies of the Snake and 3 copies of the Elf. Basically, the interaction here is that if you can go turn 2 Constrictor into a turn 3 Rishkar, then you get 4 total +1/+1 counters. You'll usually end up with a 4/4 Rishkar and a 4/5 Snake in that situation, and both of them can tap for mana, usually leading, hopefully, to a Verdurous Gearhulk on turn 4, which can only make your guys bigger because you'll get up to 8 counters. Of course, the presence of the combo, though, leads to a bunch of other interaction with +1/+1 counters because of how good Winding Constrictor is. And note that you can also get more energy counters whenever you generate energy. So Constrictor is just good all around, but the problem here is that the shell is very obvious. You know, we've got Constrictor, Rishkar, we know we want to play some amount of Verdurous Gearhulks, but the rest of the shell is very, very, very much open from there. So what the heck are you supposed to do? First of all, I'll start with the obvious. We'll play 4 copies of Verdurous Gearhulk here because it too is just crazy with Winding Constrictor. But the best thing about it is that it's also amazing even if you don't have a Winding Constrictor out. It's actually fine if you have nothing else out. You get an 8/8 guy, so that's also pretty stupid. Even though Gearhulk is sort of an obvious auto-include, and I'd play 4 all day, I would not go under 4 copies, and I'd play 12 if they'd let me. But aside from that, I know it's an obvious auto-include, but cards like Gearhulk are still sort of the secret to the deck. You know, everyone's trying to figure out the best ways to interact with Constrictor and Rishkar. But honestly, I think you just play cards that are awesome on their own, and if they get to interact with Constrictor, it makes them completely busted. And Verdurous Gearhulk is a good example of that. Now, since Verdurous Gearhulk is such an important piece, and it's pretty high on the top end there, 5 mana's not low or anything, that I want to be able to ramp into Gearhulk as easily as possible. We've already got Rishkar to help us do that, but it requires at least one other creature on board, and then it has to tap and stuff, so it can't attack next turn, even if it's big. So there's problems there. I think the safest way to make sure that we can ramp into Gearhulk easily is just play 4 Servant of the Conduit. Servant's good because not only can it lead to a 4-turn Gearhulk, but if you happen to have a Constrictor out and you play your Servant, you actually get 3 energy, which is pretty great, actually. It's also good for just fixing our mana. We don't have a whole bunch of black stuff in the deck, but some of our black cards do cost 2 black, so something that fixes our mana is very welcome. But what else? Most of our other cards in the deck are going to generate +1/+1 counters or interact with them in some way or another, and let's start with the most obvious things first, including our 3 of Tireless Tracker. Tireless Tracker sort of goes along with what I was just saying about Gearhulk. You know, we want cards that are good on their own, and Tireless Tracker is a proven Standard pseudo all-star. It hasn't really been on its game lately, but since Smuggler's Copter isn't in the format anymore, I think that maybe Tireless Tracker has a chance to shine again. I'm also going to play 2 Drana in the deck. A lot of people aren't playing Drana in this, and I don't know if that's a mistake or not. So far, I've really enjoyed her. You know, we don't have Smuggler's Copter in the format anymore, so Drana gets a little bit better. Not to mention that if we, again, do have a Winding Constrictor out, then she will hit for combat damage before any of our other creatures, everybody knows that by now, and end up putting 2 counters on all those creatures instead of just the 1. So that's just insane, and Drana's fine by herself. She gives the deck some much-needed flying. And even though there are things in the format like Spell Queller and Avacyn, Aether Sphere Harvester, Heart of Quran, there's some stuff. The big thing here is that we don't have to worry about a Smuggler's Copter outclassing this card before we've even played it. I'm going to play 4 Walking Ballista in the deck, and I would not be caught dead playing any fewer than that. This is one of my favorite cards in the whole deck, and I have seen a lot of people that have done testing with the card say similar things. A lot of people, after playing a few games, have fallen in love with this card. Now, the card does not need Winding Constrictor to be good. It's also good on its own, but it's good with other cards in the deck. Not only is it obviously good with Constrictor, but it's good with Verdurous Gearhulk, too. You know, sometimes you'll play a 4/4 Gearhulk, give all those counters to a Walking Ballista, and just unload on something. Or finish off a Planeswalker or an opponent, you know. Like, just deal 4 to the dome and take them out. Like Walking Ballista can sometimes represent 5 or 6 damage over the course of a game for you. And if you've got a Constrictor out and you play a Verdurous Gearhulk while you've got a Ballista on the field, things can get absolutely insane. You'll end up getting 5 counters on one Ballista and just going ballistic. Stupid joke, but at least it wasn't planned. That was stream of consciousness. Sorry about that joke. Ballista's also good with Drana and Rishkar. Just so many good interactions in this deck that we're definitely going to play us some Walking Ballista. It represents damage to a creature. It's removal. First of all, it's colorless, so it doesn't tax the mana base. It can put counters on itself. It interacts well with Constrictor and Drana and Verdurous Gearhulk and other stuff. Just like, I'm telling you guys, Ballista is so freaking crazy. Play this card. The last 2 creatures in the deck are a toss-up. I'll tell you what I ended up playing. I'm playing 2 copies of Armorcraft Judge in the deck, but you could play instead 2 copies of Scrounging Bandar. The quick case for Bandar is that it can put counters on Walking Ballista. That's cool. It can represent 2 mana for 2 damage, so that's pretty cool right there. If you've got a Constrictor out, it represents 4 power for 2 mana, which is good. It comes out as a 3/3 if you've got a Constrictor, but actually it represents 6 power, because every time you give a counter to something, that counter will double. So really, really good with Constrictor too. But I went with Armorcraft Judge here because we're soft at the 4-drop slot. We really don't have much of anything at 4-drop, and this is good for that. It's like this and Walking Ballista, basically. I'm a 2/2 Ballista. So we needed a little bit more action at the 4-drop slot, and if you draw this late in the game, and even on curve, like if you go, Constrictor, Rishkar, this on the next turn, then you're drawing a couple of cards right there, so that's pretty good. But late in the game, if you've got a fairly developed board and you can draw like 3 or 4 off of this, then it's one of the best cards in the deck. My record for drawing off of this is 6, actually, and it's a full freaking refill. Like, people are not playing this card very often in this deck, and that just flummoxes me. I have no idea why you wouldn't try at least 1 or 2 copies of this card. When you get it in the late game, it's crazy and will refill your hand and will put you back in the game if you're behind. And yeah, the card isn't great when you're behind, I get that, but late in the game on somewhat developed boards, even if it just draws you 2 or 3 cards, it's still ridiculous. The card is good. So that was all 26 creatures, and now I'm going to move to some Planeswalkers that I feel like we have to play that also create creatures for us. Those being a mandatory, in my opinion, 4 copies of Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. I know some people want to play 3 copies of this card and leave 1 in the board or not even do that sometimes, but I think that you definitely want 4 copies of Nissa in this deck. Not only does she create creatures and help us go wider, give us a board to develop for, Verdurous Gearhulk or something, she's also obviously crazy with Winding Constrictor. There's that. Just putting +1/+1 counters on all of our dudes is good with Constrictor. It's good with Armorcraft Judge. We just talked about that card, so there's that. And I don't mind playing 4 because often if we draw another one, we can just kill the one that's in play by neg-2ing it, putting counters on everything, and dropping the other one. Also, another reason to play 4 of this, and probably the best reason to play 4, is that these control decks are running rampant right now, and they're probably some of the best decks in the format, and we don't perform very well against them unless we can get above a Yahenni's expertise early in the game. That's not always the easiest thing to do, especially on the draw. But against those decks, especially on the play, if we can, resolve Nissa before they get their counters online, then they're going to have a really hard time dealing with that. Nissa creates an enormous headache for all of these very, very popular control decks, and that in and of itself makes me think we should play 4 of her. On to some spells, though. We're going to play 6 total spells and call it a day. 2 of those spells are Oath of Nissa, though. This is another one that I haven't seen in every version of this deck, but it can end up getting 30 different non-land cards and all the lands, so that's pretty good. I think that there's enough card advantage and action on turn 1 is important to make it worth playing this card main deck. It can set us up to get, our Winding Constrictor or our Rishkar or our Gearhulk or our Ballista or whatever we're looking for very early in the game, and I am always into plays like that. I guess you could also play like Narnum Renegade in this slot if you're not into Oath of Nissa, but, I think that Narnum Renegade is kind of sort of a trap a little bit because the dream is a 3/4 Renegade when you have a Constrictor out, but you have to have a Constrictor out and you have to activate Revolt. It's just, I don't know about that. By the way, while we're talking about like 1 mana things that you could play that I didn't play, I just want to reserve like a little slice of time in this video to talk about a thing that some people are running that I did not end up doing because I didn't enjoy it. when I was trying it out, and that is a package that includes Greenbelt Rampager and Longtusk Cub. The idea here is that Cub works really, really well with Constrictor because you'll get an extra +1/+1 counter, you get an extra energy. Same with Greenbelt Rampager, you know. Greenbelt Rampager with a Constrictor out can actually provide you with enough energy to give a counter to the Cub every turn, and really you're giving 2 counters to the Cub if you've got a Constrictor out. But that is a lot of stuff to have out, and honestly, Rampager is okay without Constrictor, but Cub is really kind of just bad without Constrictor. So again, I want to follow the philosophy of having cards that are good with or without Winding Constrictor in play, and I just don't think that Longtusk Cub passes that test. Even though the energy production is great on it, you know, you'll end up with a 4-power Cub in just one go. That's good for just the 2 mana, don't get me wrong. I just don't know that I found this plan consistent enough to be good. And with that, the last card in the main deck, that's 4 copies of Grasp of Darkness. My reasoning here is that we want to play some amount of removal other than Walking Ballista. It's not as reliable as I want it to be, so we'll just play a 2-mana spell that kills most of the things in Standard and, most importantly, in some ways, disrupts Saheeli combo, you know. And we just have a way to, like, knock mid-range creatures off the battlefield so we can get some damage in. Just definitely want to play some removal, and Grasp is the best example of black removal in the format other than Fatal Push, but I'll relegate Push to the board here. Here's your mana base right here. There's 24 lands in it, and I do think it's worth playing Aether Hub just so we can get an almost Gemstone Mine if we have a Winding Constrictor out. And it's just a fine card on its own, just like all the other good cards that we're playing in the deck. I think it's definitely almost worth playing if we aren't playing Constrictor, but since we are, I think it definitely gets a slot in the deck. Oh, and Evolving Wilds is there mostly to trigger the Revolt on Fatal Push when it comes in from the sideboard, and also because it's really hella good with Tireless Tracker, OBS. And here's your sideboard. There's the Fatal Push I've been jabbing about. Want to play a couple copies of that, if not a couple of more. There's an animation module just because it's super cute. You know, you're going to have a lot of stuff with counters on it. Module's good as far as that's concerned, and it can even put another counter on a Nissa if you needed to, so remember that. Blossoming Defense is against all the removal the control decks are playing. We actually have to play a few different cards on the board against removal because it is a bad matchup for us. And Natural Obsolescence is the cheapest way to deal with artifacts right now and get rid of them. Not forever, but at least long enough to get in for the combat damage we need to end the game. Scrapheap Scrounger is also good in the control matchup because it can keep coming back. We need creatures like that specifically for that matchup. Transgress the Mind is not bad against control. We'll sometimes side it in against those, but it's also mostly in there against combo decks. It works pretty well against Saheeli combo because it takes both pieces of the combo, or, you know, one or the other out of their hand, and just a bunch of other stuff in the format. And then Murder, also in there against Saheeli combo, but it pulls double duty against Torrential Gearhulk. It's the only removal we have that can take care of that. And here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 66. And yeah, that resiliency out of 6 is actually real. You'd think the resiliency would be low, but with cards like Tireless Tracker, Winding Constrictor, Rishkar, Verdurous Gearhulk, Walking Ballista even, like, the deck is very, very resilient because almost all of its pieces contribute to a very hard to deal with board for control decks, which are the decks that we're most looking to be resilient against. Notice that the deck is above average in most categories, which is something you can't say about a lot of decks, but you know, it's not the fastest deck ever, but it deserves a 7 in speed because sometimes it can get these like ridiculously explosive starts. So there's that, you know. It's above average in offense, you know. It's got decent power level overall in all of its cards. So a lot of above average categories here. And even though it doesn't lead to like an overall 70 like we're in Tarkir block, those decks were ridiculous. It still leads to a pretty above average score. 66 ain't half bad. That's very competitive from what I can tell in this environment. Overall, the deck gets slightly expensive. It is a competitive deck, and it'll cost you around $250 at last estimate. But things like Rishkar, Walking Ballista even, may come down a little bit, you know, after the set's been out for a while. We start opening it. Demand gets lower, supply gets higher. So, as usual, some of these cards will come down. And depending on whether or not a tokens deck takes prominence, a card like Nissa could go right back down again. Notice that she's like 11 or 12 bucks right now, and you can buy the dual deck for like, what, 20, 25 bucks, I think? So buy your dual decks and get your $12 Nissas. It seems pretty awesome. But in any case, I think Nissa may trend back downwards after the deck gets a chance to cool off, and maybe green-white tokens won't be huge in this standard. And again, that'll cause Nissa to cool off. So I don't expect the deck to be this expensive forever unless it's one of the best decks in the format. And I've already said it might be. So we'll have to wait and see what the price tag does. But right now, it's fairly high. But for now, I'm tapped out. That's all I've got on this one. I'm going to let you guys pick what we do next time. I've gotten a lot of requests, we'll say, for a couple of different decks. Now, I want to do either an aggro deck next time, and that would be mono red. I really want to show you my mono red deck, along with maybe a double deck tech for red-black aggro. I haven't decided, but either mono red or double deck tech mono red, red-black aggro. Think about that. Let that marinate. But another deck that a lot of people want to see so far is the blue-white or perhaps Bant. My build would certainly be Bant. Clues deck with mechanized production where you win off of 8 clues. Do you want to see that one? Because I've already made it and I could show it to you if you want to. Oh, and by the way, before I leave out of here, Aetherborn tribal people, I see you in the comments. I'm just not sure if there's enough. We'll try it though. I'm looking into it. Aetherborn tribal people, don't freak out. I'm looking into it. But that's all I got for now. Go ahead and like the video if you like the video. That helps me more than anything you can do. And you can also sub if you're new so you can get the deck tech content. Make sure you hit the bell so your stupid inbox lets you know when I upload videos. And I'll see you guys next time. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizard.